Marcus Jackson had always been different. Not just in the way he thought or the way he saw the world, but in the way he created. His art was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal, often capturing emotions too complex for most people to understand. Yet, he wasn't known for his work. In fact, Marcus was a mere speck in the art world, just another aspiring artist trying to make a name for himself in a world that was filled with competition, elitism, and gatekeeping. For months, he had been submitting his paintings to various galleries across the city, hoping for a break. His modest apartment was filled with canvases, paint splatters, and brushes, each one a piece of his soul laid bare for the world to see. But the world? The world didn't seem to care. That's how Marcus found himself standing outside the glass doors of Wellington's Fine Art Gallery on a crisp autumn morning. He had heard of the gallery's prestige for years, one of the most exclusive spaces in the city, where only the most elite artists could hope to have their work displayed. For someone like Marcus, a black artist from a working-class neighborhood, it felt like an impossible dream. But he was determined. If he could just get in front of the right person, maybe, just maybe, his art could finally be seen. The doors opened with a soft chime as he stepped into the spacious, minimalist gallery. The bright, white walls contrasted sharply with the vivid colors of the paintings hanging on them. There was an air of sterile sophistication, like stepping into an alternate reality where only those with money, connections, or a certain level of privilege had a seat at the table. He approached the receptionist, a young woman with platinum blonde hair and an air of superiority that seemed to permeate the entire space. "I'm here to meet with Mr. Charles Wellington," Marcus said, his voice steady but nervous. "I have some paintings I'd like to show him." The receptionist didn't look up from her computer screen. "Mr. Wellington is currently in a meeting. You can wait, but I suggest you make an appointment first. He doesn't just meet with anyone off the street." Marcus's heart sank. He had expected this kind of response, but hearing it aloud made the sting even sharper. But he wasn't going to give up so easily. "I don't mind waiting," Marcus replied, holding up the small portfolio bag he had brought with him. "It'll only take a few minutes to look at my work. I promise, it'll be worth his time." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. After a long pause, she gestured toward a seating area with a sigh. "Fine, but don't expect much. Mr. Wellington is a very busy man." Marcus sat down, his palms sweating as he clutched the bag tightly. He could feel the weight of every judgmental glance from the gallery's patrons. His presence, it seemed, was a disruption to the carefully curated world around him. But he wasn't about to back down. This was his moment. He had earned it. After what felt like hours, the gallery doors opened, and a man entered. He was middle-aged, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, his thinning hair slicked back with gel. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room before landing on Marcus. It was Charles Wellington, the gallery owner. Charles had heard of the artist who was causing a stir in the underground scene, though he had yet to see any of his work in person. He was skeptical of anyone who didn't fit the mold of the typical artist, those who had the right connections, the right education, the right pedigree. Marcus, with his rough-around-the-edges appearance and lack of formal training, didn't exactly fit into this world. "Well," Charles said, glancing at the receptionist with a hint of impatience, "what is this about?" The receptionist, with her usual disinterest, gestured toward Marcus. "He says he has some work to show you." Charles gave a dismissive nod and motioned for Marcus to follow him. As they walked through the gallery, Charles spoke in a tone that was almost too casual. "We don't usually take unsolicited submissions here, you know. Our artists are vetted, and their work is often sought after before it even makes it onto the walls. But, if you think you have something unique, I'll give you a few minutes." Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but he kept his composure. This was his chance. He wasn't going to let Charles's arrogance push him away. Charles led him into a private viewing room at the back of the gallery. The space was quieter, with only a few pieces of art on display. He gestured toward a pedestal in the center of the room. "Set your work here," he said. "Let's see what you've got." Marcus hesitated for a moment before opening the portfolio bag. He took out the first painting, one of his favorite pieces, a large, abstract portrayal of a woman's face, distorted with bold strokes of color. The expression was both haunting and beautiful, a reflection of the pain and hope that defined his existence. Charles didn't even bother to take a step closer. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at the piece with an almost dismissive air. He muttered. I see what you're trying to do here. Abstract, bold. But I don't think it's going to make it in the mainstream. Too raw. Too unpolished. Marcus clenched his jaw but didn't respond. He placed the next painting on the pedestal, a striking image of a city street at night, bathed in neon lights. The painting captured a sense of loneliness and isolation, even amidst the chaos of the city. This was his tribute to the marginalized people he grew up with, the ones who never seemed to fit into society's mold. Charles raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk. Ah, yes. Urban life. I've seen this 100 times. It's all very predictable. Do you really think someone would pay millions for this? Jalen turned to Dr. Novak, who had been watching him intently. I think we're ready. Humanity's ready. Dr. Novak's expression softened. You're sure? Jalen nodded. Yes. We can't keep waiting. The universe is calling to us. And we need to answer. With that, Jalen picked up the brush one last time, dipping it into the vibrant paint. The final stroke was made. The message was complete. The world would never be the same again. Months had passed since Marcus's humiliating encounter with Charles Wellington, and in the silence of his modest apartment, the sting of rejection had slowly transformed into fuel. He had returned to his canvases, each brushstroke a testament to his perseverance. While the art world had turned its back on him, Marcus refused to be defined by their rejection. His art was his voice, and it was going to be heard, whether the world was ready or not. Despite the cold dismissal he had received from Wellington's gallery, Marcus had refused to stop. The rejection had ignited something deep within him, a burning determination to prove not just the art world, but society, wrong. He knew that real talent couldn't be ignored forever. He worked tirelessly, day and night, often losing track of time as his brush danced across the canvas. Each piece he created seemed to have more life than the last. His art became a reflection of his journey, a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and defiance. The passion in each stroke was undeniable, and the colors he chose were bold, vivid, and unrestrained, just like the artist himself. But it wasn't until one evening, when Marcus stumbled upon an article online, that everything began to change. The headline caught his eye: New Rising Star Shakes Up the Art World, the work of Marcus Jackson. At first, Marcus thought it was a mistake. Maybe they were talking about someone else with the same name. But as he read further, his heart began to race. The article was filled with praise for a new artist who had begun to captivate the attention of collectors, critics, and art lovers alike. The critic's review of his latest work was glowing, describing his paintings as raw, vibrant, and unlike anything else in contemporary art. The writer even claimed that Marcus's paintings held a deep emotional weight that was difficult to find in the more commercialized, safe art of the elite galleries. It was happening. The recognition Marcus had dreamed of, the breakthrough he so desperately needed, was here. His phone rang, and the name on the screen caused him to freeze. It was Ava Michaels, one of the most influential art critics in the city. She was known for championing new talent, especially artists who weren't part of the established elite. Her endorsement had launched the careers of several well-known names. And now, she wanted to speak to Marcus. Marcus, Ava's voice was warm and enthusiastic when he picked up the phone. I've been following your work for some time, and I have to say, I'm incredibly impressed. Your paintings are something extraordinary. The depth of emotion, the boldness of your brushstrokes, it's not just art, it's a statement. Marcus couldn't believe his ears. Ava Michaels was praising his work. He had been hoping for a moment like this for years, But to actually hear it, to have someone of Ava's stature validate his efforts, was surreal. Thank you, Ava, he stammered, trying to keep his composure. That means so much coming from you. Ava continued, I'm actually putting together an exclusive show next month at the Art Haven Gallery, and I'd love to feature your work. We're going to be showcasing a select few artists whose work challenges the status quo, and yours fits perfectly into that category. The offer was more than Marcus had ever hoped for. The Art Haven Gallery was known for its bold exhibitions, pushing boundaries and giving new artists the platform they deserved. The opportunity to have his work featured in a gallery like that was life-changing. But even more than the recognition, it was validation for everything he had endured, the years of rejection, the dismissive comments, the doubts he had fought to overcome. With the show scheduled and his work ready to be displayed, Marcus's life began to shift in ways he had never imagined. His paintings sold for tens of thousands of dollars, and soon, the once-ignored artist was at the center of a burgeoning art revolution. Critics were flocking to his exhibitions, drawn to the raw power of his work and the narrative of resilience that it conveyed. And it wasn't just the critics. Collectors began to take notice. The kind of collectors who frequented the exclusive, high-end galleries Marcus had once been excluded from. But now, they were seeking out his paintings, willing to pay top dollar for a piece of his soul, for a piece of art that had once been dismissed as too raw by those who didn't understand it. Marcus was no longer struggling. He wasn't just an artist, he was a symbol of defiance, a beacon for others who had been overlooked. His art represented more than just color on a canvas, it represented survival, it represented fighting back against a world that tried to suppress him. Every brushstroke was a reminder that no one, no matter how insignificant they seemed, should ever be underestimated. But all of this success didn't go unnoticed by the art world elites, the very people who had once scoffed at his work. Charles Wellington, the very same man who had dismissed Marcus months earlier, began hearing whispers of the artist's rise. At first, he couldn't believe it. How could someone like Marcus, someone with no formal training and no proper connections, suddenly become the talk of the town? He had seen his kind before, well-meaning, but ultimately unrefined. Yet, as the weeks passed, Charles couldn't ignore the buzz. He saw Marcus's paintings starting to appear in other galleries, saw them selling for incredible sums at auctions, and heard from collectors who wanted nothing more than to own a piece of this newly discovered genius. One day, as Charles scrolled through his social media feed, he came across a post from an art critic he respected, one of the first to write positively about Marcus's work. The critic described Marcus's work as the future of art. Jalen turned to Dr. Novak, who had been watching him intently. I think we're ready. Humanity's ready. Dr. Novak's expression softened. You're sure? Jalen nodded. Yes. We can't keep waiting. The universe is calling to us. And we need to answer. With that, Jalen picked up the brush one last time, dipping it into the vibrant paint. The final stroke was made. The message was complete. The world would never be the same again. Marcus's name was everywhere. His work had gone from being dismissed to being celebrated as a revolutionary force in the art world. Exhibitions, galleries, and art collectors clamored to get a piece of his story, both literally and figuratively. What had once been a struggle for recognition was now a rush of success, and Marcus was the centerpiece of it all. Despite the fame, Marcus remained grounded. His art was more than just a career, it was a way to tell the world about the struggles he had faced, the pain he had endured, and the beauty he had found in the wreckage. The world was finally beginning to listen, but Marcus knew there was more to this game than just the work itself. To truly make a mark, he had to learn to navigate the complex, often cutthroat, art business. In the midst of this whirlwind, an unexpected opportunity arose. One afternoon, as Marcus sat at his favorite cafe near his studio, his phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but the message that followed made his heart skip a beat. Marcus, this is Victor Chen from the Art Consortium. I represent several of the top collectors in the world. We've been following your work closely, and we'd love to discuss a potential partnership. I believe you're on the verge of becoming the next great name in art, and we want to help you get there. Victor's reputation preceded him. He was known for being one of the most influential figures in the art market, working with the wealthiest clients who could afford to spend millions on art. To be approached by someone like him was a sign that Marcus's rise was not just a fleeting moment, it was real, and it was only going to get bigger. After several meetings and discussions, Marcus signed a deal with the art consortium to represent him exclusively. With their resources, his paintings began to fetch astronomical prices, much higher than he had ever imagined. But this wasn't just about selling art, it was about becoming part of the art world's elite, a world that Marcus had once been shut out of. As his fame grew, so did his influence. Marcus began purchasing other works of art, pieces from artists who had inspired him or whose work resonated with his own philosophy. It wasn't just a financial move, it was a way to begin shaping the direction of the art world. He wanted to use his newfound power to uplift artists who, like him, had struggled to be recognized. He didn't want to just be a part of the system, he wanted to change it. The gallery spaces he had once been denied access to now wanted him as a buyer, not just an artist. One by one, Marcus started buying iconic pieces, some for millions, others for far less, but each acquisition added to his growing collection. He was collecting not only for his own enjoyment but as a statement that the art world was beginning to look very different. However, Marcus's rise didn't sit well with everyone. Charles Wellington, the same gallery owner who had mocked him months earlier, had watched the meteoric rise of Marcus from the sidelines. Wellington had heard whispers that Marcus was making waves in the art world, buying up some of the most sought-after works. But Wellington had convinced himself that the buzz was overblown. This is just a phase, he thought. The media loves a story of an underdog, but real art buyers want the tried and true. That was until one morning, when he opened his inbox and saw an email subject line that stopped him cold: Marcus Jackson buys $10 million Picasso. The email contained a link to an article detailing how Marcus had secured a rare Picasso painting at an auction for a record-breaking price. It was a purchase that turned heads in the art world, signaling that Marcus was not just here to stay, but that he had the financial power and taste to shape the future of art. Charles's reaction was one of disbelief. The art world had always been about exclusivity, about keeping the elite circle tight. But Marcus wasn't just collecting, he was making bold moves, reshaping the landscape. He wasn't just an artist anymore, he was a force to be reckoned with. Still, Charles refused to believe that someone like Marcus, with his unpolished background and apparent disregard for the traditional art hierarchy, could truly be a serious player. So, in an attempt to gain control of the situation, Charles decided to make an offer he thought would be impossible to turn down. One afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected call from Wellington Galleries. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, but with an underlying hint of desperation. "Marcus, I've been following your progress, and I must admit, I was wrong about you. Your rise has been nothing short of remarkable. I'd like to offer you an exclusive exhibition at Wellington Galleries, where your work could truly shine alongside some of the greatest names in the art world." Marcus smiled to himself, knowing full well that Charles had probably come to the conclusion that featuring his work was the only way to stay relevant in this new, shifting art market. "I appreciate the offer, Charles," Marcus replied coolly, "but I've already found my place in this world. You see, I don't need your gallery anymore. My art is where it belongs, where it will be seen by the right people, not just the wealthy few." Charles was taken aback by Marcus's confidence. This wasn't the humble artist he had dismissed months earlier. This was someone who knew his worth, someone who had outgrown the need for validation from people like him. Marcus wasn't done yet. "I've decided to make my own moves in the art world. I'm not just going to create. I'm going to buy. I'm going to collect the work of artists who matter, who have something real to say. And if you're interested in making a deal, we can talk, but I'll be the one calling the shots now." Charles was silent for a long moment, the gravity of Marcus's words sinking in. When he finally spoke, there was no condescension in his voice, no hint of mockery. "I see. I'll have to think about it. But Marcus didn't wait for him to decide. He had already made up his mind. The art world, once dominated by the elite few, was now in the hands of people like him, those who had been overlooked, ignored, and underestimated. Marcus Jackson was no longer just an artist. He was a buyer. And his acquisitions were shaking the very foundations of the art world. The days after Marcus's phone call with Charles Wellington were filled with frenetic energy. The art world, once so elusive, had opened its doors to him in ways he never thought possible. His work had become the benchmark for a new era in art, one that transcended the old rules of elitism, exclusivity, and pretentiousness. Marcus wasn't just an artist now, he had become the game changer. Despite his rising prominence, Marcus remained focused on his mission, to reshape the art market into something that valued authenticity over pedigree, expression over status. He wanted to prove that great art wasn't just for the wealthy and the well-connected, it was for anyone who had the courage to create. His work and acquisitions sent a clear message: the art world had been fundamentally wrong, and it was time for a reckoning. His success didn't go unnoticed by those who had once turned him away. Charles Wellington, though a seasoned player in the art world, could feel the ground beneath him shifting. The market had changed, and the power that once lay in the hands of gallery owners like him was now slipping through his fingers. Marcus Jackson's influence was undeniable. His paintings were commanding record prices at auction, his curated exhibitions were drawing crowds from all over the world, and his collection of art was starting to rival that of the most established collectors in the field. But it wasn't just Marcus's artistic prowess that made him a force to be reckoned with. It was his ability to make shrewd business moves, to read the market and understand what people really wanted. He had turned the tables in a way that no one had anticipated. The old guard was scrambling to catch up. One evening, as Marcus reviewed the plans for his next exhibition, a show dedicated entirely to emerging black artists, his phone rang. The name on the screen was familiar, and it caused a twinge of curiosity to ripple through him. Victor Chen, the voice on the other end said, cool and businesslike. Marcus, I've been following your recent moves, and I must say, you're making a lot of waves. There's one thing we haven't discussed yet, and it's something you might be interested in. Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He had heard whispers of Victor's growing interest in his career, but he wasn't sure what this new offer might be. What's on your mind, Victor? There was a pause, and then Victor's voice took on a more serious tone. I know you've made some incredible strides in the art world. But there's an opportunity to take things even further. Wellington Galleries is struggling. The business is floundering, and Charles is in a panic. He's trying to reinvent himself, but it's too late. The collectors are flocking to you, Marcus. I think it's time to consider your next move. Marcus's interest peaked. He had already heard rumors about Charles's growing frustration, but hearing it from Victor, someone in the industry, felt like confirmation. I'm listening, Marcus replied. Think about it. Wellington's has been around for decades. But their model is outdated. Charles has spent his entire career building an empire on exclusivity and connections. He's never understood the value of art beyond the status it confers. But you, Victor's voice grew more intense. You're the future of this industry. You're the one who's bringing real change. If you took over Wellington's, it would send shockwaves through the art world. You'd have access to the kind of resources and influence that would put you at the top, not just as an artist, but as a major player in the industry itself. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, considering the offer. The idea of owning one of the most prestigious galleries in the city was tempting. It would give him the kind of control he had only dreamed of. He could reshape the gallery's direction, use it to support emerging artists, and, most importantly, dismantle the elitist structures that had once denied him a place at the table. But it would also mean going head-to-head with Charles Wellington himself. Finally, Marcus spoke. How much control would I have? I don't want to be some figurehead. If I do this, I need to be in charge. Victor's response was quick and confident. You would have complete control, Marcus. The financial backing is there, and the collectors would follow your lead. It's the perfect opportunity. The proposition hung in the air like an electric charge. Marcus could feel the weight of it, the responsibility, the risk, the potential. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to walk into Wellington's, not as an artist desperate for recognition, but as the one in charge. He could transform it from a space of exclusivity into a hub for all artists, regardless of background or privilege. "I'll think about it," Marcus said, hanging up the phone. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just something to consider, it was an opportunity he couldn't ignore. The days that followed were filled with meetings and discussions. Marcus met with financial advisors, art experts, and even some of the collectors who had once been part of Wellington's circle. He learned more about the gallery's financial struggles and the mounting pressure on Charles Wellington. It was clear that the once powerful gallery owner was out of touch with the direction the art world was heading. His refusal to adapt to the changing landscape had left him vulnerable. As Marcus prepared for his next move, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. Just a year ago, he had been a struggling artist, rejected by galleries, overlooked by critics. Now, he was on the verge of taking control of one of the most prestigious galleries in the world. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Charles, but for the entire art world. Then, the moment arrived. Marcus stood outside the iconic glass doors of Wellington Galleries, the building that had once turned him away. His pulse quickened as he stepped inside, feeling the cool, sterile air of the space that had once represented everything he despised. Charles Wellington was waiting for him in the back office. As Marcus entered, he could feel the tension between them. There was no more arrogance in Charles's demeanor, no more condescension. What remained was a man who had lost his grip on the art world he had spent so many years building. "Marcus," Charles said, his voice low. "I never thought I'd see the day you'd be standing here like this." Marcus walked to the desk, his confidence unwavering. "Times change, Charles. The world changes. And now, it's your turn to adapt, or get left behind." Charles leaned back in his chair, his face hardening. "What do you want from me, Marcus? You've already proven yourself. You don't need me." Marcus's gaze never wavered. "I want what you built, Charles. Wellington's galleries, your legacy, can be part of the future. But I'm the one who's going to lead it." Charles stared at Marcus for a long moment, the weight of the words settling in. Finally, he spoke, his voice tinged with bitterness. "So, you want to buy me out?" Marcus smiled, not in malice, but with quiet confidence. "No, Charles. I don't want to buy you out. I want to take over. The art world is changing, and it's time for you to step aside." The confrontation between Marcus and Charles Wellington was a moment of seismic change in the art world. As Marcus stood in the polished, sterile office of Wellington Galleries, the reality of what was about to happen hit him. This wasn't just about personal success, this was about rewriting the entire narrative of art: who gets to create, who gets to sell, and, most importantly, who gets to define what art means. Marcus had always believed that art was for the people, not just the privileged few. His rise had been fueled by his belief that talent and vision shouldn't be confined to those with wealth or connections. He had spent years fighting to be heard, to be seen, and now, he was standing at the threshold of being able to make art accessible to everyone. But as he looked at Charles, sitting across from him in his sleek leather chair, it was clear that the old guard wasn't going to go down without a fight. Charles had spent decades building his reputation and his empire. To let go of all of that, to be displaced by a young artist he had once mocked, was a bitter pill to swallow. Charles's voice broke the silence. "You don't know what you're asking for, Marcus. This isn't just about you and me. You're talking about dismantling everything I built. Wellington's isn't just a gallery, it's a legacy." Marcus didn't flinch. "That's the problem, Charles. The legacy you built is based on exclusivity, on shutting out people like me, people who don't fit your narrow vision of what art should be. You've had your time. Now, it's time for the world to change." Charles's face hardened. You think you can change it all in one go? You think people will follow you because you've sold a few paintings? The art world isn't some simple marketplace, Marcus. It's built on relationships, on trust. You think you can come in and disrupt everything, but you'll lose it all in the end. Marcus leaned forward, meeting Charles's gaze. I'm not here to play by your rules, Charles. I've already lost everything once, I'm not afraid to take risks. The world is changing, and I intend to be the one who drives that change. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The tension in the room was palpable. Charles, for all his power and influence, was beginning to understand the magnitude of Marcus's ambition. Marcus wasn't just some flash-in-the-pan artist. He was a new force in the art world, one that could reshape the very system Charles had spent years maintaining. Finally, Charles spoke again, his voice quieter, almost resigned. So, what do you want from me? You've made it clear you don't need me. Marcus's voice was calm but firm. I want Wellingtons. I want the resources, the space, the platform to support the next generation of artists, the ones who don't have access to the galleries you've controlled for so long. I want to make art accessible, to make it about creativity, not about status or wealth. Charles sat back, his hands folding in front of him. He knew that Marcus wasn't going to back down. The question wasn't whether he could stop Marcus, it was whether he could adapt. I don't think you understand, Charles continued. Wellington's is more than just a gallery. It's about exclusivity, high-profile clients, and the big names. You want to open it up to every artist out there? You'll ruin it. You'll water it down until it's nothing more than another commodity. Marcus smiled. Maybe that's exactly what it needs, to be watered down. Maybe the true value of art isn't in who owns it, but in who gets to experience it. Charles scoffed. And what do you think that will do to the prices? The art market runs on exclusivity, Marcus. Without it, your paintings will be worth nothing. You'll have no leverage. Without Wellingtons, without the elite, where will you be? Marcus stood up, feeling the weight of the decision settling over him. He wasn't just fighting for his own career, he was fighting for an entire movement, for the artists who hadn't been given a chance. I'm not looking to profit from exclusivity, Charles. I'm looking to build something that lasts. A legacy that isn't about keeping people out, it's about lifting them up. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles, for all his years of power and influence, seemed to be at a loss. He had never anticipated this kind of challenge, not from someone he had dismissed as a nobody. He had spent his career managing art as a business, but Marcus wasn't just another artist, he was a force of nature, and that force was about to sweep through the very foundations of everything Charles had built. I'll make you an offer, Charles finally said, his voice betraying a note of desperation. You want Wellingtons? Fine. But I'll make sure you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. You can take control, but only if you prove to me that you can handle it. Marcus didn't hesitate. I don't need you to prove anything to me, Charles. I've already built my career from nothing. I've already proven myself. I don't need your approval, and I don't need your legacy. But I do need Wellington's, and if you're willing to hand it over, we can make this work. Charles sat back in his chair, defeated. For the first time, he saw what Marcus had been building, not just a career, but a revolution. He could see that Marcus was no longer the artist he had once mocked. He was a businessman, an entrepreneur, and a visionary. He was someone who understood the future of art better than Charles ever could. Well then, Charles said quietly, it seems like the art world is in your hands now. Marcus nodded. It's in all of our hands, Charles. We're going to make something new. Something real. In the weeks that followed, Marcus began the process of taking over Wellington galleries. The change wasn't immediate, but the foundation was laid. The old ways of running the gallery were dismantled, and a new vision began to take shape. Marcus didn't just want to showcase established artists, he wanted to find the undiscovered, the overlooked, the ones whose voices had been silenced by the old guard. He wanted to give them a platform, a chance to make their mark on the art world. At the same time, Marcus continued to build his own legacy. His work had become more than just paintings on a canvas, it had become a movement. He began curating exhibitions that featured works by marginalized artists, works that challenged the norms of the art world, works that told stories of struggle, resilience, and defiance. His success didn't come without challenges. The establishment fought back in subtle ways. Some of the more traditional collectors began pulling their support, and other galleries attempted to discredit his work. But Marcus was undeterred. He had already proven that he didn't need the old system to succeed. His art had spoken for itself, and now, his business acumen was doing the same. In the end, it wasn't just Marcus's success that marked the shift, it was the ripple effect he caused throughout the art world. The gatekeepers, the collectors, and the gallery owners who had once controlled everything were starting to lose their grip. And while some of them would continue to fight for their place, others, like Charles Wellington, were being left behind. Marcus Jackson wasn't just an artist. He was a new force in the art world, and he had come to change everything. The early days after Marcus took control of Wellington galleries were a whirlwind of action and transformation. The old, stodgy exhibitions were replaced with fresh, vibrant shows that celebrated diversity, inclusivity, and radical creativity. The gallery walls, once adorned with the works of established, high-profile artists, now boasted paintings that told stories from all corners of society, stories of struggle, resilience, and hope. Emerging artists from underrepresented communities found a platform for their voices, and for the first time in a long time, Wellington's was no longer a bastion of exclusivity but a place where art could breathe, grow, and evolve. But while the air in the gallery was charged with excitement, not everyone was pleased with the changes. The old guard of the art world, those who had benefited from the status quo for decades, began to grow uneasy. The power dynamics were shifting, and with it, their influence was waning. They didn't take kindly to being pushed aside by a young upstart who had dared to challenge the very foundations of the system they had built their careers upon. Resistance from the old guard. The first signs of resistance came in the form of subtle whispers, rumors among collectors, murmurs at gallery openings, and offhand comments from curators who had long held positions of power in the art world. Marcus Jackson's revolution won't last, they would say. He doesn't understand the true value of art. He's just capitalizing on a trend. Some questioned his credibility, dismissing him as a flash-in-the-pan artist with no real understanding of how the art market worked. Others whispered that he had no staying power, that his ideals would eventually crumble under the weight of reality. But Marcus was undeterred. He had faced resistance all his life, from the galleries that had turned him away to the critics who had belittled his work. He knew that change didn't come without opposition. He knew that the most transformative movements were often met with the greatest resistance. Still, the pressure was building. Wellington's new direction was making waves not only in the art community but in the financial world as well. The gallery's shift to showcase underrepresented artists, and its focus on accessibility and social justice, had attracted a new generation of collectors and buyers, those who were looking for something more than just a pretty painting to hang on their wall. They were interested in art that mattered, art that had meaning, art that was a reflection of the world they lived in. Marcus's exhibitions were drawing record crowds, and the art world was beginning to take notice. But not everyone was thrilled with this new influx of interest. The established collectors, those who had been accustomed to hoarding prized artworks as exclusive investments, began to feel threatened. They saw the market shifting, and they didn't like it. They feared that the kind of art Marcus was championing would devalue their own collections. They feared that the democratization of art would erode the exclusivity that had made their holdings so valuable. One evening, as Marcus was walking through the gallery after hours, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Victor Chen, the art dealer who had been instrumental in helping Marcus take control of Wellington's. The message was brief, but its message was clear: the resistance is growing. The old guard is circling. We need to act fast before they regroup and make their move. Marcus read the message and felt a surge of determination. He had known from the start that taking control of Wellington's would not be easy. But he wasn't backing down, not now, not when he was finally on the verge of changing the entire art landscape. A meeting of minds. The following day, Marcus called for a private meeting with the heads of the gallery's board, people who had been in the art business for decades, who knew the market inside and out. These individuals were the linchpins of Wellington's success in the past, and while they had reluctantly agreed to support Marcus's new vision, they were still wary of the changes he was implementing. The meeting was held in the gallery's main office, a space filled with modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Marcus arrived early, his mind focused and sharp. He had a strategy to keep moving forward, despite the opposition that was slowly building against him. As the board members filed into the room, they exchanged wary glances. They were all aware of the rumors swirling around the art world about Marcus's bold direction. They knew that the traditional collectors were unhappy, and they could feel the tension in the air. They were the ones who had helped keep Wellington's afloat in the past, but now, Marcus had become the true face of the gallery's future. It was time for them to decide if they were going to stand by his side or if they would crumble under the pressure. "I've called this meeting," Marcus began, his voice steady, "because we need to address the growing resistance in the art world. The old guard isn't happy with what we're doing here, and they'll stop at nothing to undermine us. But we have something they don't: vision, authenticity, and an undeniable connection with the new wave of art buyers." One of the board members, a middle-aged woman with a sharp gaze, crossed her arms. "We know, Marcus. But we also know that these established collectors, people who buy art as an investment, are powerful. They have influence. If we alienate them too much, we could risk everything. Wellington's reputation is built on its relationships with these buyers." Marcus didn't back down. "I understand the importance of those relationships. But we can't let fear dictate the direction we're going. This is a chance to reshape the art market, to make it about something more than just money. We have to prove that art has value beyond its price tag." There was a pause, and then another board member, a man in his 60s who had been in the business for decades, spoke up. "But Marcus, do you really think you can change everything so quickly? The art world is a business, and businesses need profit to survive. If we lose our traditional clients, we could be in serious trouble." Marcus nodded, acknowledging their concerns. "I don't think we'll lose our traditional clients. We're not abandoning them. But we need to broaden our reach. We need to embrace the future, not just the past. And if we want to survive, we need to stay ahead of the curve. The old way of doing things is dying. We can either adapt and lead the charge, or we can let it die with us." The room was silent as the board members processed Marcus's words. He could see the weight of the decision on their faces. This wasn't just about art, this was about survival. They were standing at a crossroads, and Marcus was offering them a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves. But it wasn't going to be easy. After a long pause, the woman who had crossed her arms spoke again. "You're right. The world is changing. Maybe we don't have a choice. But we need to make sure that we're doing this right. We can't afford to fail." Marcus smiled. "We won't fail. Because we're not just selling art. We're creating a movement." The tension in the art world had reached a boiling point. Marcus Jackson's revolution at Wellington Galleries had gained unprecedented momentum, but the old guard was far from defeated. The establishment, once confident in their control over the art market, now found themselves scrambling to hold on to their dominance. They were determined to not only discredit Marcus's movement but to crush it entirely. Marcus had known the fight would get ugly. The powerful collectors, dealers, and curators who had long been the gatekeepers of the art world were now working behind the scenes to try and discredit Wellington's, and by extension, Marcus himself. They began using their influence to sway the media, planting stories about how Wellington's was undermining the traditional art market. Rumors spread that Marcus's work was part of a fleeting trend, that it lacked the authenticity and sophistication that the art world had come to expect. The old guard had launched a full-scale assault, and it seemed that nothing would stop them from turning back the tide of change. But Marcus was no stranger to adversity. He had faced rejection all his life, and now, he was up against something far bigger than just a few closed doors. The fight was personal. It wasn't just about Wellingtons anymore, it was about redefining the entire art world. He was prepared to do whatever it took. The tipping point. It all came to a head during the opening of Marcus's latest exhibition, The Future of Art, which featured a diverse range of artists from marginalized communities. The show was more than just a collection of paintings, it was a statement. A statement that art wasn't a commodity to be hoarded by the wealthy, but a living, breathing force that belonged to everyone. The event was held in a massive, state-of-the-art space within Wellington's, with the walls adorned with vibrant works that challenged societal norms, questioned power structures, and gave voice to the voiceless. The atmosphere was electric. Visitors flowed through the galleries, taking in the new works, engaging in animated discussions about the power of art to spark social change. For the first time, the energy in Wellington's felt different. This wasn't a high society event, it was a celebration of the future of art, an art that belonged to everyone, not just the elite. But as the night went on, Marcus noticed something unsettling. A group of well-dressed figures had gathered near the entrance, their expressions cold and judgmental. They were prominent collectors, longtime patrons of Wellington's, and other prestigious galleries. They were the ones who had financed the old guard's vision. Their presence at the event was calculated, they wanted to see if Marcus's revolution could really stand up to the weight of their influence. As the night wore on, the tension between the new wave of artists and the old elite became palpable. One of the collectors, an older man named Reginald Wainwright, approached Marcus. His sharp, calculating gaze cut through the crowd as he walked toward the young artist. He was known for his connections in the art world and had been one of the most vocal critics of Marcus's takeover of Wellington's. "Mr. Jackson," Wainwright said, his voice oozing with condescension, "this is quite the spectacle. You've done a good job of creating a buzz, I'll give you that. But do you honestly think the art world will embrace this populist nonsense? This isn't art. It's a business model, cheap, mass-produced, and entirely disposable." Marcus held his ground, his posture straight and his voice unwavering. "Art has always been a business, Mr. Wainwright. But it's not just about the money. It's about what art can do for people, what it can say to the world. What it can change. You see art as something to be bought and sold. I see it as something that can transform lives." Wainwright scoffed. "Transform lives? You're naive, Jackson. The art world runs on prestige, exclusivity, and, yes, money. Without those things, your revolution is just a fleeting moment in the history of the art world. It won't last." Marcus smiled, his eyes shining with the knowledge that this fight was bigger than just the present moment. Art has always been about more than just prestige and money. It's about human connection. It's about telling stories that matter. And as for lasting, well, that's for history to decide. Wainwright's smile faltered as he saw the confidence in Marcus's eyes. He knew he was dealing with someone who wouldn't back down easily. "You think you've won," Wainwright said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But mark my words, Jackson, you're playing a dangerous game. You'll see how quickly the art world can turn on you." Marcus nodded. "Let it turn. The art world can either evolve or fade away. We're moving forward, and there's no stopping us." The public backlash. The following weeks were a whirlwind of media attention, both positive and negative. The press had caught wind of the confrontation at the opening and latched onto it, turning the battle between Marcus and the old guard into a public spectacle. Major art publications ran stories questioning whether Marcus's vision was truly sustainable, while others hailed him as the future of the art world. The media frenzy only served to heighten the tension, and soon, Marcus found himself at the center of a storm. While some collectors continued to question his credibility, others began to rally behind him, seeing him as a breath of fresh air in an industry that had grown stagnant. Social media erupted in support of Marcus's revolution, with fans, artists, and advocates for social change using the hashtag #ArtForAll to share their thoughts on what the art world could become if it embraced Marcus's vision. The resistance from the old guard, however, was relentless. Some of the most influential critics in the art world began writing scathing reviews of Wellington's exhibitions, questioning the quality of the work and calling Marcus's approach dangerous. They predicted that the market would eventually reject his vision and that his rise was nothing more than a passing trend. But Marcus wasn't shaken. He had been underestimated before, and he knew that in times of change, the loudest voices were often the ones that fought to preserve the old ways. He had a new vision for art, one that was bigger than any gallery, any auction house, or any critic. It was about creating a movement that would transcend the narrow confines of the traditional art market and bring art back to the people. A final decision. One fateful morning, Marcus received an invitation to a private auction held by one of the world's most influential art collectors, Catherine Pembroke. Pembroke had made her fortune by buying and selling the rarest and most expensive works of art, and she was known for being an influential figure in the art world. The auction would feature some of the most exclusive works from the old guard, and it was said to be a last-ditch effort to reassert their control over the market. As Marcus walked into the grand hall of the auction house, he could feel the weight of the moment. The old world of art, with all its opulence and exclusivity, was on full display. The paintings that hung on the walls were masterpieces by the greats of the past, works that had been hoarded by collectors for decades. But Marcus wasn't there to buy art. He was there to make a statement. As the auction began, he stepped forward and made a bold move. He placed a bid, not for one of the paintings, but for the entire auction house. It was an audacious gamble, one that shocked everyone in the room. But it was his way of saying, "This is the future of art. This is the revolution." The room fell silent. The old guard looked on in disbelief, not knowing how to react to this unprecedented move. But Marcus stood firm, a symbol of the change that was now inevitable. The auction house was his, and with it, he had cemented his place as the leader of a new era in the art world.